about water and urban places. This is Ideanthro. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. Coming to you today from Coonabarabran. So we're continuing this trip through regional New South Wales, and we're in Coonabarabran to look at these couple of rain gardens here, built on the end of a dead-end street right near the local river here. And there's a couple of things that I think it's worth paying attention to with these. So we're going to look at three things here. We are going to look at something to mull over. We're going to look at something that's a little bit different with the under drainage, and then we're going to look at the really sensible reason why these systems were put here. So let's get into this. So the first thing to mull over, look, we've got this street, it's a residential area. It used to drain into the river behind us, and there was a lot of erosion of the bank on the bend of the river. So we're on the outside of the bend on the river here. There was a lot of erosion of the river, partly just from the the flows in the river itself, but then also the overland flows from this street shooting off down the bank there, because it's a pretty steep bank. So these systems are put here on the end of this street. And the first thing that I noticed when Mick from the Central West Council's Environment and Waterways Alliance brought me out here was, hey, you know what? There's a plant in here that's doing really well that I don't often see do really well in bioretention systems, and that's Carex oppressor. So Carex, for anyone who's in the know, is a species, by the way, that's C-A-R-E-X, Carex, not carrots, the vegetable. Carex oppressor, it's a plant that, like, when it's tested in the lab, is a bang on, really good bioretention plant. But it generally likes to have its feet a little bit wet. It doesn't want standing water, but it does want its roots down into lots of water and lots of moisture if it's going to stay happy over the long time. So typically where I've seen it do well in the past is where you have a bioretention system that's maybe actually clogged up a little bit too much, or maybe got a constant base flow and something's keeping it a little bit too wet, and the Carex really likes it. We've got these systems here, there's no indication of these systems being too wet or overly clogged up with sediment or anything of that nature, but the Carex have lasted quite a while. Apparently the systems are about 2.5 years old now. So I think that's something to mull over. I don't know the answer to why that is. I don't know whether it's something about the climate here, I don't know what. But that's something to mull over. Carex oppressor doing better than I would normally expect it to over the long haul. The second thing, and this one I think is quite a practical little idea. So one thing that is apparent about these streets is that there is a reasonable sediment load coming down here, and these are saturated zone bioretention systems. The saturated zone could be contributing to the Carex being healthy, but yeah, that's not as straightforward as I think, but it's a possibility. We've got a saturated zone system here, and because of how the systems were built, these are what the Bioretention Technical Design Guidelines from Healthy Waterways would describe as a level constrained system. So ideally, if you're building a saturated zone bioretention system, you've got the layers of filter media and then the sand and the gravel coming down, and you'd have the pipe along the base, and ideally, somewhere in the outlet pit, you'd have a T-shaped piece that would allow, you'd block off the end of it, so the normal operation, water would have to come up a T and over and out. If you want to visualize this, you can go back to our recent episode titled How Saturated is Saturated, which is all about saturated zone systems. The water would have to come up the T-piece and out, but if you wanted to drain it or clean the under drains, you could undo a screw cap on the end of the T. I suppose it's an upside down T in this case, so it's the edge of one of the bottoms of the upside down T. You could unscrew that and the water could drain out freely, and if you wanted to flush it, you could flush sediment out that way. But this system's been built as a level constrained system, presumably so they didn't have to dig quite as big a trench to then get the outlet pipe out to the river. And so what that means, they quite rightly identified, well, how would you ever flush this out? How would you ever actually clean this system out? Because your under drain comes along, does a big old 90-degree bend straight up and across again, you've got like 400 mils of rise. You'd never be able to jet that sediment out of the pipe if you needed to clean it. So they went, okay, we're in this situation, we have this level constrained thing here, but we want to, we recognize we're never going to clean out these under drains, but we want to do something to make this system a little bit more resilient. If the under drain ever does start to clog up with sediment, fines might migrate through over time. I personally haven't seen a lot of it, but it is good to build this resilience in. So what they did was, coming along the base of the system here, coming along the flat, and before it gets to the 90-degree bend to come up to create the saturated zone in the base of the system, they put a T-piece in and dropped just a straight length of pipe down just below the underdrains. Really simple. And the thinking being here that any sediment that did get into the pipe at the upper end of that and was slowly being washed down over time wouldn't just get washed to the end and accumulate and build up and clog it up, but it would get washed down and then drop into this little downwards facing PVC pipe and accumulate in there. Now eventually, like, give this long enough, eventually theoretically that could fill up and clog up, but it could buy you quite a lot more active time, quite a lot more lifespan to a bioretention system if you thought that was at risk of happening. And particularly if you've got small little systems like this where you've maybe only got one underdrain in there, so you've got no redundancy in the system, it's not a bad idea. Now, given that it's a saturated zone system and you need it to be impermeable at the base, if you were making an impermeable liner, then suddenly creating the space for this downwards tee is going to be a little bit awkward. It works here because they're on really quite heavy clays and they could just compact the in situ clays. But that's an idea that I like, just that response to, look, we got a problem, what can we do while we're on the run constructing these things? Because one of the aims of these systems was that they needed to be, like, their point was, okay, we had a problem here that needed to be fixed. Yeah, I'll talk about the problem first. Let's talk the problem, then we'll come back to the construction. So the problem that needed to be fixed here was the fact that, look, we've got this catchment running down. It's previously been going overland flow down the outside of the bend of this river. There's big erosion in the river. They were going to do bank stabilization, but still didn't want those overland flows coming down. So they wanted to be able to infiltrate the water and slow the water here before it got into the river and continued that large scale erosion. And that's what I like. That's a bioretention system being put in place for a really sensible reason. It's a big thumbs up for that. It's not like, oh, let's just find a random street and put one in. It's going, look, where is the logical spot to do this? Hey, this makes sense, let's do it here. And then what this ties back to is the other purpose, besides fixing that problem, the other purpose of these systems here was to be a demo and to give the council staff experience building systems like these. So really part of the purpose here was that they had to be built in-house and they had to be simple enough that the council staff, you know, could do it themselves with the equipment that they had and with no previous experience, getting a little bit of assistance. Obviously had plans to follow and getting some assistance out in the field the first time around. But what the main purpose here was to be simple and easy to construct, to build that experience so it can then be replicated later. And these systems fit that bill. They are built from, you know, some of the materials were already here from previous attempts to stabilize some of that erosion. And that's what I like about where it combines into this idea of, okay, let's put this little downward bend in the underdrains, because that was a response that they came up with on site. They thought about this and they went, look, wait, hang on. How's anyone ever going to clean this out? Okay, let's adjust on the fly and put in a little bit more resilience into this system, make it a little bit more resilient. And that's just something, that's what I like about it. If you have systems that are relatively simple and intuitive to understand, then you can also make adjustments on the fly to fit with the circumstance using the practical knowledge of the people that's building them. And I like it. So that's three things to think about with these systems in Coonabarabran. The Carrick's is doing surprisingly well. There's a nifty little under drainage configuration that you're never going to see, and I'm never going to see, but hopefully Mick's going to give me some photos and you will have already seen it in this video. And thirdly, the system's here for the right reasons. There was a real problem to be solved, and it's a sensible solution, and it allowed people to gain experience building this sort of thing. And that's really what we should be aiming for with putting these systems in. Systems that are in the right space at the right time and make sense and help us all to learn. Okay, that's it. I hope you enjoyed these systems. We will see you soon. Before you go, our best episodes come from your questions. This knowledge base, these discussions that are Ideanthro, improve with your contribution. So if there's a topic, an idea, a concept that you would like us to explore, come and ask us. You know where to find us. www.ideanthro.com/contact. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and that place you get your good podcasts from. You know where to find us. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you soon.